BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Friday, and Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. First, I would like to give a shout out to Midnight Story Productions, who suggested today's episode, and the material that is the topic, the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders of 1977. And this is one that was requested by one of the listeners, so if you have an idea or a suggestion about something that you would like covered on the channel, you can put those in the comments section below. But I do confess the topic list is getting rather large now, but I still want to get to some of your requests. Now, because this one is one that was requested by one of the listeners, I have to be 100% honest with you guys. I had never heard of this case until it was requested here on YouTube, so I'm an absolute newcomer to this, but sometimes there can be a certain value in an outsider's take on the subject, a fresh set of eyes, someone who is new to the game, or even that line that Toshiro Mifune said in the film Senjuro, sometimes outside eyes can have the best view, something to that effect. So there's actually a very good introduction that was written about this case on alcatrazeast.com, and that is that on the 13th of June 1977, 3 young Girl Scouts were kidnapped from their tent in the middle of the night at Camp Scott in Oklahoma. The 3 girls were Lori Lee Farmer, age 8, Michelle Gousset, age 9, and Doris Denise Miller, age 10. The next day, a child's body was found in the woods surrounding the camp, and it was discovered that all 3 girls had been brutally murdered. When it came to looking at sources for this case, there are a lot of people out there talking about it. There are a lot of YouTubers that are talking about it. The first video I watched was from Bella Fiore, and no disrespect to her, but I watched her video, and I did not come away with an ounce of understanding about what had happened. There are just so many new names and new places, as well as the course of events are a little bit difficult to follow. So we do have these 3 girls, though, Lori Lee Farmer, Michelle Gousset, and Doris Denise Miller. In most sources, she is referred to as Denise Miller by her middle name. And the date of this crime was the 13th of June 1977. But when we look closer at the timeline, through some forensic estimations, they went to bed on the 12th of June, and this carried over into the 13th. So it could have actually happened on the 12th of June. Something could have begun between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., and the forensic estimations that I mentioned were dealing with rainfall and water buildup, and they were trying to determine what would be the window in which someone could have committed this crime. So it may have actually begun sometime around midnight, maybe 11:50, 11:55 on the 12th, but that's just, I don't think that's the heart and soul of any of these issues. But in regards to the way that this crime was committed, all right, there's a triple homicide, right? That's absolutely horrible, and it really is. I was warned that this is going to be a sad one, and it is just sad and horrific to hear about these events. But the day after the crime has taken place, in the morning, someone is walking along the trail. I think it was actually called the Cookie Trail, and yes, indeed, named for Girl Scout cookies. And that person noticed a sleeping bag that seemed out of place. She thought maybe it had been some luggage that had been left behind from somebody, but upon further inspection, it was the body of a young girl that had been stuffed into the sleeping bag. And they've also examined the crime scene. That's the police, the investigators, and they determined that 2 of the victims, Lori Lee Farmer and Michelle Gousset were most likely killed in the tent, and then the third victim, Denise Miller, was escorted out of the tent and killed at a later time. No, I mean, it would have been very close to the time in which she was escorted out of the tent. Now, the first two names that we read off, Lori Farmer and Michelle Gousset, were killed with blunt force trauma. Denise Miller was struck in the head multiple times, and there are even some very large imprints that were left in the head, but her cause of death was strangulation, and all of the girls were sexually assaulted in some way. I think that's all we need to say about that. So the bodies were discovered, and they have some information about when the crime would have taken place. They also found a red flashlight that was nearby the crime scene, and that red flashlight had a fingerprint on it, which they believe most likely belonged to the perpetrator. There was also a bloody foot inside the tent on the platform, like one of those wooden pallet platforms that they would use at campsites, and that bloody footprint was determined to be estimated 9.5, a size 9.5. But I don't think that all of the steps that we went through just now are the reasons why this case becomes the most puzzling mystery in Oklahoma's history, why this case becomes the most shocking case in Oklahoma history. I think that there's another element that comes into play, and that is that roughly 2 months before this horrific tragedy, there was an incident that took place at the camp, and that someone had their tent ransacked, torn apart, and everything is thrown around. This is one of the staff members in training had their things all torn up and scattered around, and even a box of donuts that had been sitting there had been eaten, and the person who found their stuff ransacked was going to throw away the box of donuts, but at the last second just tried to look inside just to open it up to see what was left, and there were lots of crumbs, but there was also a note that said that there was a plan to kill 3 girls in tent 1. I read that many times, and I just my brain had flipped those things around. 3 girls in 1 tent, but it in many of the sources it's documented as 3 girls in tent 1. The girls that I was just talking about, Lori Farmer, Denise Miller, and Michelle Gousset, were in tent number 8 actually, and there was supposed to be a 4th girl that was going to be assigned to tent 8, but they ended up letting her stay in a different tent, which I believe was tent 7 for one night, and she was supposed to move into tent 8 later on, and by the stroke of fortune, she, that saved her life, more or less. But then you'd have to think, if this person is so hell-bent on murdering a tent with 3 girls, or murdering 3 girls that are alone for some unknown deranged reason, they might have moved toward a different area. We don't really know. They might have just selected a different location. So, they might have targeted a different group of 3 girls. So, even if this 4th girl had been in the tent, they might have moved to tent number 7 if that one only had 3 girls in them. But it's a heavily premeditated crime. If indeed the same person wrote the threat and then 3 girls are murdered in a tent, at a first look on the subject, prima facie, it appears that, yes, the person who wrote that note went on to commit the murder. There certainly doesn't seem to be too much debate about that, but that is somewhat of a substantial time gap. It's between 6 weeks and 2 months prior. This is during the training phase, and this was really at the beginning of summer camp. It's within 24 hours of the summer camp, Camp Scott, being open in this Oklahoma area. And this is actually, what is it? It is in the Magic Empire Council, was the name of the Girl Scout council that was running this, which is an excellent name. But they were later on were sued for $5 million by the families of the victims, because there was this threat that took place, and the staff worker brought the threat forward to the directors, but they dismissed it as a prank because they're viewing that, and most people would dismiss this as a prank. To give them just an ounce of a human element, it was perhaps wrong. Perhaps they made the wrong decision. But I really do think many people would have dismissed it as a prank, that writing this note that 3 girls will be murdered in tent 1, or 3 girls murdered in 1 tent, however you'd like to lay out the information, whatever idea you think is trying to be conveyed. And I think many people would just simply say, oh, this is some prankster. They tore up this person's stuff and then they ate a box of donuts. Now they're trying to just leave some nasty note behind. Before we even look at the psychological process of someone who would go on to commit murders like that, what do you make of the ransacker who tore apart that person's belongings, ate the donuts, and left behind this note? What is that all about? That type of behavior, invading someone's shelter, invading someone's private belongings, that suggests to me that this is someone who wanted to create the image of terror, destroy the concept of security, and sending a message. But it goes a step further, because you don't have to ransack someone's place and then eat a box of donuts. I would go out on a limb and say that the person who did that was probably not hungry. Instead, that is almost like adding insult to injury, but instead it's like that person is trying to use that as a display of power tripping. That's the entire process. Ransacking, eating somebody's food in a way in which they know it's going to be found. They know that this person is going to say, hey, this person came into my space and they just arbitrarily ate my food. That's what it is. It's a gesture of power tripping, albeit a silly one. But what's not silly is the death threat that came in place, and then that death threat was followed through. So there appears to be a heavy amount of premeditation involved, which also suggests that the perpetrator was not some extreme clinical psychotic, unless it was a very, very high-functioning one. But it's definitely not an impulsive set of murders that took place. This triple homicide was calculated. It was done by someone who wanted to perhaps send a message as well. Maybe someone who wanted some type of revenge. Maybe just revenge on women in general, targeting 3 girls in a Girl Scout camp, or someone who thought that they were so smart and so powerful that they could commit this crime and get away with it. And it also really shows you that DNA was not a big thing in 1977. Someone would do something like handling someone's box of donuts and eating things, and I mean, if this were the case in 2021, there would be all kinds of DNA left behind, I'm sure. I mean, there are numerous cases where DNA has been extracted from chicken wings, or the mansion murders that took place in the DC area involving Derwin Wind, where DNA was extracted from a pizza crust. I mean, the perpetrator really wasn't even, I mean, DNA wasn't even on the radar at the point, at that time. Some other sources that I would like to cite for this episode is Mercadox, which is available on YouTube. I thought that they did an excellent presentation on this. Absolutely excellent. But the absolute best one that I found was one that was called The Most Horrifying Story You Have Never Heard of, Oklahoma Girl Scout Murders, and it was from the channel Explore With Us. That's just the name, Explore With Us. I had never heard of this channel before, but at the time of this recording, they have 1.21 million subscribers, so perhaps they've never heard of Black Box Online Radio either, so I'm going to just say we are even. And the other sources that I was looking at were Caitlin Rose's channel. There's a podcast called Morbid, a true crime podcast, but really it's that one from Explore With Us that I thought was informative. They laid out the facts, and they also did it in a storytelling way that very good presentation for somebody like me who was absolutely new to this Explore With Us. Caitlin Rose's video was a little bit more informative, and she spent some time talking about the theories, though, and I'm going to say one of the theories that she discussed for later on. But if you do want to look at some other things about the case, I said that I watched Bella Fiore's video, and I mean, it really isn't any like a disservice to her. It's just that there's so much info going on in an 11-minute video presentation. I think a lot of it gets left out. Or if you're not familiar with the people that she was talking about, it was very difficult to follow. But then, in the other direction, there's a video that is out by the channel. It's called Bad Magic Productions, Time Suck, the 1977 Girl Scout Murders. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes long, and that was in the exact opposite direction. all of this extra info was in there on like the history of scouting and like the scouts starting in England and such, Lord Baden-Powell, and that was in the opposite direction, just a lot more added in info, and that was also very difficult to follow for someone who's trying to grasp the heart and soul of the case. But one point that I found that a lot of these different sources were not sharing too closely was that why didn't other people seem to notice anything that was going on until the morning? If the crime did indeed occur between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. the night before, what is what is really happening in this camp? I mean, like, how far apart are these tents to the point where nobody would know what was going on? And of course, there were people that did. Someone even reported hearing the scream, "Mommy, mommy," in the middle of the night, but they just dismissed it and they went back to trying to go to sleep. When you hear these sounds in the night, people aren't necessarily 100% sure what they are thinking, and it's possible that this perpetrator, this power-tripping, premeditated, and deranged individual who committed these crimes was really trying to get away with this, thinking that he's very intelligent, but also extremely lucky that he just wasn't interrupted, and I think luck was on his side that night, as gruesome as that is. I would like to go back to that article from AlcatrazEast.com that shared some things, and I'll just read the sentence that they have one more time about how this staff and training member had their tent ransacked. 2 months prior to the murders, a counselor's tent was ransacked during a training session, and a note was found saying that 3 young campers were going to be murdered. That's the whole 3 girls will die in tent 1. However, the counselor deemed the note to be a joke and discarded it without pursuit of any action. In other sources, I did read that she brought it forward to the directors, and they were the ones who dismissed it as a prank, that she did notify somebody about that. I just wanted to say. Now, here's the part that is truly important. The prime suspect of the murders was a prison escapee named Jean Leroy Hart, who had been doing time for a previous conviction of kidnapping and rape in 1966. Jean Hart died while on the run from police from a heart attack at the age of 35. When the medical examiner tested his DNA in 1989, the results were found to be inconclusive. The DNA was later retried in 2002 and 2007, but there were still no positive matches. I really don't mean to jump ahead too much, but in almost all the other sources, I have not read that he died while on the run from the police. As I understood, this individual, Jean Leroy Hart, was arrested. And when he was arrested, he told the person like the apprehending him, "You won't pin this one on me." And you can interpret that in a couple of directions. It could be someone who's extremely guilty who doesn't want to go to jail for a crime that he committed, or it could be someone who thinks, "You're trying to blame something on me that I didn't do." But he had escaped from prison for previous crimes, and then they did add years onto his sentence. And he was tried for this. Like I said, this is a very big story, but because this article seems to have got a little bit mangled with that, long story short is he was tried for the 3 murders and acquitted. He was found that he pled his innocence throughout the entirety of the trial. And there's a website that is dedicated to this case about the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, and they have all these newspaper articles talking about how Jean Leroy Hart is insisting that he is innocent of all of this involved with the murder of the 3 girls, and they said that he cried when he found out that he was acquitted. But because he had escaped from prison and he had already committed previous crimes, this abduction that they were talking about, kidnapping and rape in 1966, he was sentenced to 300 plus years in prison. 2 months into that sentence, he had a heart attack, and I don't know what they're talking about here about how it happened when he was on the run from the police, died while on the run from the police and had a heart attack. I'm not sure where they got that from. Every other source that I had looked into said that he was exercising in the prison yard and he overexerted himself and then he had a heart attack. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I do like the way that Alcatraz East though did did begin the introduction, because it does seem somewhat confusing about how everything was laid out, like the arrangements that the girls would have had sleeping in this one tent, and about how no one was able to find out what was going on with them. But when you think about it, like summer camp, a very secluded place, an area where someone is not going to be having a lot of supervision, and most summer camps do not have security. When I went to summer camp, sleepaway camp, whatever you'd like to call it, there certainly wasn't any security. Yeah, there's a park ranger and such, but there's no security. There are no watchmen. There are no people who are actively monitoring the perimeter trying to prevent these things. And this was a horrible tragedy that took place. But no, Gene Hart may have committed the crimes, but there are some problems with Gene Leroy Hart. And it doesn't have to be simply DNA. His shoe size was at least a size and a half too large. We said that there's a 9.5 size shoe that left the prints inside that tent. And I think it's just one footprint that was left behind, 9.5. He was around a size 11. I think that's the one that I read. His shoe size was 11, so people can wear shoes that make themselves larger, but it's quite difficult to wear a shoe size that's a size and a half smaller. And also, the fingerprint that was left on that red flashlight that was found near one of the bodies did not belong to Gene Leroy Hart. And the fingerprint is only on the lens, meaning someone most certainly was wearing gloves when they were trying to commit the crimes, and perhaps they had touched the flashlight before they had put the gloves on, or they had tried to wipe down the flashlight, and they left behind one fingerprint that was left on the I guess you could call it the lens, but the bulb perhaps would be or the plastic in front of the bulb on the flashlight, but I think you get the idea there. So all of that stuff is coming back, showing that that was not Gene Leroy Hart. So when I was on Caitlin Rose's channel, she put forward a theory. I repeat, a theory. This is not like something completely established, but there were multiple perpetrators involved with this. All three girls were sexually assaulted. I won't provide too many details about that, but luring one of the girls out of the tent and then committing this murder, and then the other two girls are murdered in the tent. She said very clearly she thought there were multiple perpetrators involved with this, that there's more than one person, and it may have even been a woman or something, but I can't even really speculate too much. For me, as someone who is a newcomer, I wouldn't be able to tell you who did what role, and I do think that if you have three people who are inside of one tent, and that there are these screams coming out, but they are mostly disregarded by the other campers, and it sounds more like so they think that someone's crying, they're crying for mommy. They just simply didn't think too much of it because they're like, this person must be homesick or something like that. And the girls were writing letters to their parents that they were going to send, and like it was something that was traditionally done. I think maybe everyone in the camp was working on some project like that. But yes, multiple perpetrators would explain a lot, except for the fact that you have one footprint, you have one fingerprint, and the forensic evidence might not completely suggest that, and then that would require you to make a series of assumptions. But instead, it seems like someone who is definitely not impulsive, very controlled, perhaps had some very traumatic experiences in their childhood, maybe from women, maybe from their mother, and that's why they're targeting a Girl Scout camp. Or it could be that this was just a place that they learned about and they thought that the girls would be in a vulnerable location. But that note that's left beforehand saying that that three girls are meant to be murdered. I mean, this was a premeditated attack, and it's calculated. Someone knew the steps that they had to take. It really seems like a sexual thrill kill. Disgusting, though, absolutely shameful. And we will be back after a quick message, but I would just like to say one more time, rest in peace to the victims. This is an absolutely horrible tragedy. But Doris Denise Milner, Lori Farmer, Michelle Gousset, rest in peace one more time, and be right back after this. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to talk about some of the ways in which you can help Black Box Online Radio. This channel relies on your support, and the best way you can help out is just by listening to some more content. If you like what you hear, you can hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends on social media. But I should also say that Black Box Online Radio now has a Teespring page, and there will be some links in the description box. Please feel free to check out some of the merchandise that is available. Almost all sizes and colors are listed. So, you can also help out by going over to the Zodiac Killer channel and watching the documentary series Obsession into Darkness, parts 1, 2, and 3. I was one of the contributors for that, and you can see some other great Zodiac content on the Zodiac Killer channel. And yes, there will be a part 4 of Obsession into Darkness at some point in the future. And for now, let's get back to the show. Okay, hello, and we are back. Another piece of evidence that emerged in the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders was in relation to a set of caves that were nearby Camp Scott where the girls were murdered. And the long story short is, first, a message was discovered in one of the caves that said, "The killer was here, bye bye fools," and it was signed 776-17. Quite odd that they would write the year first. As an American, that seems absolutely out of the ordinary to me, but 6/17, meaning that the murders took place on a date during the second week of June. As we said, it was 11 p.m. into 6 a.m., anywhere within that window. And then this says 6/17, but there's a website dedicated to this mystery called girlscoutmurders.com. There's also a book out that they are promoting there. You can also get the book on Amazon.com. And they posted so many articles. That's how I found the articles about Gene Hart proclaiming his innocence. And the title of this one is Three Caves Figure in Scout Case. And just to have a read. 3 caves south of South Locust Grove near Camp Scott have figured into the Girl Scout murder case. Cave 1, about 3 miles from the camp on Spring Creek, is about 100 feet from a cellar and foundation that was the boyhood home of Gene Leroy Hart, charged with the first-degree murder in the deaths of Lori Lee Farmer, Michelle Gousset, and Doris Denise Miller. It is at this cave, discovered by squirrel hunters about 4 days after the murders, where authorities found evidence linked to the crime scene, and even the things we went through there. A counselor's sunglasses, masking tape, green plastic similar to that on the flashlight was found near the bodies. A newspaper from the same edition as the newspaper immediately after the crime. The battery compartment of the flashlight were found there as well. Hart was linked to the cave when a former convict said he and Hart hid in it in 1973 after they escaped from the Mays County Jail. Authorities also found 2 wadded-up wedding photographs which Hart apparently developed in 1968 while at Granite State Reformatory at Cave 1. Cave 2, a ledge along Skunk Mountain about 2 miles from the camp, is where the farmer, Victor Auxier, reported he saw a man he thought was Hart about a week after the murders. And the next thing I would like to do is actually go to a news clip that is from KFOR News in Oklahoma, and we can hear some things that they are discussing about the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, and let's just have a listen.
A stranger who happened across this place might deem it a green Eden, never suspecting it to be the site of one of the most brutal crimes in state history. Hidden under the foliage, a single tree that would serve as a grave marker. The bodies of 3 small girls found under its shade. One of the first on the scene, OHP Trooper Howard Berry.
You're just not ready for drive up on something like that and find 3 little girls. That's something I'll take to my grave.
8-year-old Lori Farmer, 9-year-old Michelle Gousset, 10-year-old Denise Milner.
I've met 2 new friends, Michelle Gousset and Denise Milner. I'm sharing a tent with them.
Sherry Farmer holds her last link to her daughter.
We're sleeping on cots. I just couldn't wait to write.
A letter home, written only hours before Lori would be murdered.
We're getting ready to go to bed at 7:45.
Lori would never see dawn. Her body and those of her tent mates would be found jammed into their sleeping bags. Now they're coffins. Bound, brutally raped, savagely beaten.
I mean, I do kind of confess, just to interject here, that it really does start to seem like an enormous endeavor for one single perpetrator to have pulled off. I mean, three of them? Three girls? Yeah, okay, they might have been threatened, there might have been some type of means of keeping them quiet, but three of them murdered, shoved into the sleeping bags, bound, sexually assaulted. No one is running away, no one gets out, and no one is able to run and scream and call for help in a camp. I mean, just saying, based on that news report there.
Some 600 armed volunteers began a search for the killer. The state's main suspect, Gene Leroy Hart, 33 years old, Cherokee Indian. Last job, meat cutter. For 10 months, relatives and friends successfully hid Hart until an informant came forward. Former OSBI agent.
And also another interjection. As we said, Hart was on the run. He had broken out of prison, but he was in jail for those previous crimes that we talked about in part one, including things like rape and abduction. But he is on the run from a prison escape. That's another reason why the relatives are holding him. It's not only because he's a suspect in this case. So
Harvey Pratt.
She said, that's where he's probably staying. Little tire paper cabin. Had a little front porch on it, a front door and a back door, and maybe two windows on each side. The one assault car drove right up to the front door, and they all jumped out and they ran in.
Gene Leroy Hart was there. The largest manhunt in state history was over.
It was very quiet.
The OSBI's chief investigator believed then and now they had caught the killer.
This was as strong a murder case as I ever saw.
A young attorney, Garvin Isaacs, was hired to defend Hart.
Gene Leroy Hart was an innocent man wrongfully accused of a crime he did not commit.
The battle lines were drawn. Was Hart a killer or a victim? Garvin Isaacs says his client was framed. Isaacs points to evidence on a flashlight found near the bodies.
We believe it's a thumbprint on the lens of the flashlight that is not Gene Leroy Hart's fingerprint. The tent where the murders happened had a footprint in the blood. That footprint was a 9.5. Hart's footprints would be an 11.5. That was his foot size.
Investigators and prosecutors argued that Hart, a twice convicted rapist, left the same telltale signs on the little girls as on his previous victims. The case went to the jury. The jury acquitted Hart.
They had the courage to stand up for justice.
It broke my heart. It's the first time I ever saw the system not work.
And in regards to the system not working and the jury's decision, am I suspicious of Gene Hart in this? Absolutely, if you entertain some type of multiple perpetrators theory in this. But did he actually commit these crimes alone? Reasonable doubt. Absolutely, there's reasonable doubt in this. You heard that evidence they were talking about. Someone else's fingerprint is on the flashlight. Someone else's footprint is in the tent. I mean, no witnesses can place him at the scene of the crime. Absolutely, there would be reasonable doubt. The things I think that are in favor of Gene Leroy Hart's guilt would be the caves. I mean, that's not even circumstantial. It could even be coincidental that he had familiarity with the caves, and then there's this message scrawled on the cave walls, as well as his previous convictions for rape and assault, and also showing some of those same hallmarks on the victims. Those are points that I definitely get suspicious about, but if I were sitting on that jury, based on everything we've talked about in this episode, I would have to say not guilty. I mean, it's not to say that he didn't do it, but oh yes, there is reasonable doubt. I would like to go back to the clip now.
I just wouldn't believe it. See, I believed that the good guy always won.
Hart was taken to prison to serve the remaining 300 years on his previous rape and burglary convictions. Only weeks later, he died of a heart attack while jogging.
And that is where we will stop the clip. This one actually goes on for 9 minutes and 52 seconds. KFOR, Girl Scout Murders 40 years later, if anyone would like to hear the full news report on YouTube. And you heard that he was jogging. I mean, they say that he's in prison, though. He's exercising in the prison yard, as I understood, and that that's when he had the heart attack. That, I think, is the more accurate version, not from that Alcatraz article that we had that says that he was on the run from the police. I think they perhaps conflated the jogging with running itself. I mean, he's exercising in the prison. Very clearly, you heard, sentenced to 303 years for the previous convictions, but also because he had escaped from prison, and he was being harbored for a while by his family members. I mean, like, even that news report there that we were just listening to would go on to say that one person committing these crimes would be very unlikely. The only thing in favor of one person's guilt is some stuff that I think we've already talked about. There's that one single fingerprint on the red flashlight. There is that one single footprint in the tent, the 9.5. I mean, there could have been, though, accomplices. There could have been people who were participating in different types of aiding and abetting. But that's a very, very risky operation for one person to have committed. Of course, these perpetrators do have ways of subduing victims, particularly through fear, getting them to stay silent and such. But you still have to really quite wonder about that. And this is an unsolved case, and I really wish I could theorize more. But as someone at my level of understanding would probably have to do that in a future episode. At this time, though, I would like to ask you, what do you think about the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders? Do you believe that there were multiple perpetrators, or do you believe that there was a single perpetrator and that this person had just planned it so carefully for 2 months, the cold, methodical, and calculating type of murderer, as opposed to someone who is just very impulsive and following urges? Which one do you think it was? What do you think about this suspect, Gene Leroy Hart? Is that enough to exonerate him? The footprint that doesn't match his size, 9.5 versus 11. I mean, I highly, highly doubt he was wearing a 9.5 size shoe if his shoe size is 11. Also, the fingerprint that doesn't match to him. Do you think that is enough to exonerate him? Please share anything you want in the comments section below. And what do you think happened to the 3 girls in Oklahoma back in 1977? That's all for me now. I will see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. You can also write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. There's a Facebook page as well that is in the description box. All the links are provided. And please visit the Teespring page as well. See you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.